So now I would like to introduce our speakers. So we have 4 speakers now. First speaker will be Maria Alonso Raposo. She's a scientific technical project officer at the Sustainable Transport Unit of the Joint Research Center, European Commission. Then we go over to Ana Ramos, a researcher at KTH, giving us some insights into the Mistra SANS research program on sustainable accessibility and mobility solutions. The third speaker will be Carlos Lima Acevedo, Associate Professor at DTU, Department of Technology, Management and Economics, who will provide us some insights into the Share More project. This is a project funded by EIT Urban Mobility and concerns personalized incentives for car sharing. And finally, we will go over to Jeff Rysom, Chief Innovation Officer at Gale Architects, focusing on people mobility first. So this is about the relationship between human experience and design, and works to apply people first design principles to communal ecosystems, such as street, public space, food systems, and energy. So I would like to give the floor to Maria now. Thank you all speakers for joining us here. And Maria, I invite you to take over and present your slides, please.
So I start sharing. Okay, there I am. Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity of joining you today. And I'm very pleased to be able to open this session providing the policy perspective, and in particular showing how citizen engagement and co-creation practices enabled by Living Labs can support the transition to a smart and sustainable urban mobility. So the policy perspective is there coming from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, which is the in-house science and knowledge service of the Commission, whose mission is to provide support to the European Union policy making with independent scientific evidence throughout the policy process. So to start with, European cities are facing increasing challenges in terms of transport, be it in the form of congestion, pollution, climate change, but also accidents. And at the same time, urban mobility is vital for cities because it contributes to the economic growth, to the competitiveness of cities, and to the creation of jobs. But urban mobility is just one of the many complex challenges that cities are facing, challenges that are interlinked. So I mentioned before climate change and pollution. There are challenges in the area of energy efficiency, of waste, water, food and resource efficiency, health and well-being, social innovation. And then it becomes essential to stimulate the work across these different urban sectors and across different policy areas, to involve stakeholders and citizens in participatory actions that cities become agents of change. So in such endeavor, Living Labs represent a powerful tool that can foster the creation of open collaborative innovation ecosystems among players from the citizen perspective, from the public sector, from the private sector as well, and from academia. So according to the definition of Living Labs provided by the European Network of Living Labs, there are 5 main key elements that are present in Living Labs. So one is the real life settings as opposed to the use of laboratories or controlled environments. Another one is the active user involvement since the beginning of the process and throughout the whole process of design and development of any innovation. And this is very much linked to the application of co-creation approaches systematically. So it also implies that co-creation is applied as a process and not a single used event. The application of multiple methods as opposed to relying on just one single method. And also the multiple stakeholder involvement according to the quadruple helix model. So with representatives from the 4 groups of citizens, public organizations, private entities, and research. So in the context of urban mobility, living labs can support the design and the evaluation of new mobility solutions and new transport governance approaches. So this means that it's possible to to design and test these solutions in real life settings and with the active involvement of users, so that it's possible to understand what potential implications such solutions might bring, what type of changes they would imply, and therefore use this knowledge to better design policies and to better design the deployment of such technologies. So before going to a wide-scale implementation, living labs can provide this type of support. And new transport governance approaches would focus on the integration of all the transport modes in a city, on the cooperation of all the different players, all the different actors, private and public, but under the orchestration of a public authority. So this means that the coordination would be placed on a public authority that would ensure that the overall goal of such governance is placed on ensuring that public benefits are achieved. It becomes important to create networks of mobility living labs so that it's possible to coordinate efforts at European level and also to exploit the synergies of the different living labs, whether they are at EU level, but also at national, regional, and local level, so the different initiatives. So the JRC initiative of a living lab for future urban ecosystem is actually framing the implementation of different living lab projects in the areas of mobility and energy. For the moment, in two of its sites, in Ispra in Italy and Petten in the Netherlands. And this is part of the JRC strategy for 2030, whereby its premises would be turned into smart, open, efficient, and sustainable sites, and turning the sites into test beds and demonstrators for advanced technologies and citizen engagement. So in this particular context, which is embedded in the European Green Deal objectives, so achieving climate neutrality, the Sustainable Development Goals of United Nations, the Ispra site in particular, where mobility and energy are addressed, is the largest site of the JRC with more than 2,000 people on site, and actually offering a city-like environment where these different technologies can be used and can be co-designed together with the JRC staff population. Some of the objectives of this living lab are the following. One is to evaluate the technological adoption, so whether technologies are actually accepted and adopted, and what type of changes in behavior they imply. For example, in the context of connected and automated vehicles, to understand what are the users' attitudes towards these technologies. Would they use them in the end? What would be the behavioral changes they would imply, both intended and unintended? Another main objective is to support the design of policies and understand how can living labs support more efficient urban mobility policies. And this is clearly linked to the mission of the JRC, being at the interface between science and policy. And the third main objective is also to provide support to the industry, to the startups and SMEs in the design and development of successful solutions. And for this, we launch a call for expressions of interest for external entities to apply and make use of our living lab in the moment in Ispra and Petten. So citizen engagement is an essential part of living labs. It is broadly understood as the public participation in political processes, and it is high on the political agenda. So there are aims to achieve stronger role and more active roles of citizens participating in the decision-making processes. But citizen engagement comes in many forms. This is a famous reference from 69, in which you see the different levels of participation, from non-participation to full let's say participation in decision making, where citizen engagement or a true genuine citizen engagement comes above level 6, where citizens can actually be part of these decision making processes. The concerns, for example, of consultation, and that's why we refer to going beyond that, is that the citizens' opinions may not be taken on board, may not be taken into account, so they may remain unheard. So just to give you an example in this last part of the presentation about how we are aiming to go beyond consultation. So last year, we launched a public consultation activity, a special Eurobarometer in the context of connected and automated vehicles to understand the expectations of the public in the European Union, to understand the concerns, what would be the needs also of people with regard to these technologies. And we can see in the graph that half of the European Union citizens are stating that they would never purchase such technology. So it's important to get this understanding and also see how this evolves as the technologies are being introduced, are being developed. So from this consultation effort, we decided to run some focus group discussions with citizens so that we could go deeper into the motivations for those different attitudes, positive and negative ones that we found in the Eurobarometer. And also to foster some public. In parallel to that, we launched a mobility survey for the ISPRA staff population so that we can gain also some understanding of what are the mobility needs of people, what problems they're facing, what are their habits, especially tackling commuting, the mobility inside the site, and also mobility related to business trips. And trying, to focus on the situation pre-COVID, but also asking, what do you think would change in the situation afterwards? So, for example, we heard this morning about teleworking, so how this would affect your daily mobility needs. So with this activity, we're trying to understand which problems we are tackling and not put the focus only on the technological solutions, because they might not be the answer. So we want to understand what is actually needed, what's the problems, and what are citizens expecting, and what are their fears or concerns. So the next activity that would take place next year and the year after in the ISPRA site is achieve a co-creation of an autonomous shuttle service on site. So that would mean involving the Jersey staff population in the co-design and the co-implementation of such a solution, so that we can target them, and we can then study also what was their perception, the opinion, and how their behavior changes in response to such new alternative for mobility. And at the same time foster the public debate. So showcasing the technology can also help people set the right expectations about the technology, get them familiar with it, and in a way create some debate around the many important impacts that such technology may have. So to conclude, I would just like to highlight that Living Labs offer the possibility of fostering this open innovation ecosystems among the different stakeholders that are involved in the mobility ecosystem, and also with citizens, for joint value co-creation. That's an important element, so that all the different actors can find some value in this participation. Citizen engagement is an essential part of Living Labs, and remains essential if we want to achieve effective future mobility strategies, because it's the only way in which we can ensure that those solutions are targeting the real citizen needs, and that in the end citizens would adopt such solutions, and we would achieve real impact and real behavioral change. So it's important, therefore, to go for citizen engagement beyond consultation. But since it is also a costly activity, it's important to plan it well. And therefore, we need to think carefully about what type of citizen engagement do we want, why to organize it at different steps of the process, and therefore when we want to organize it, and how to actually deploy such an activity. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and also to remain available for any question you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. It's very interesting to see how these Living Labs can actually work in real life, right? And how to actually change behaviors of people, or getting more insights into what people actually need and want. So as for like Living Labs, like how can Living Labs actually support the formulation of better policies in urban mobility?
Yeah, Living Labs can actually generate insights onto what can be the potential implications of the new mobility solution. So if we refer to the example I gave about connected and automated vehicles and deploying such autonomous shuttle on site, there could be impacts at the level, for example, of travel behavior changes. So, for example, people may change the mode of transport they use, so they may walk more or less because they have access to such a service. There could be also impacts at other levels. So, for example, changing mobility habits throughout their daily mobility. That will refer to the mobility on site in particular. We could also, for example, learn whether there are some barriers for adoption, and we need to think about different incentives or think about how the other modes are also competing with such mode. And we would also gain important, I think, understanding of what are the interactions among such autonomous shuttle and other road traffic participants, so for example with pedestrians or other vulnerable road users, so that we can also understand how what would be good measures or practices that can be taken on board in the deployment of such solutions in an urban context. So then this knowledge could be transferred to the policy making, to the design and formulation of policies, so that it's possible to use these direct insights from real usage of the systems.
Okay, thank you, Maria. And I have another question actually about living labs, because this is something that we see more and more. Would you think that what would be the benefits of actually creating a European network of living labs? Do you see this happening as well?
Yes, indeed. I think creating a European network of living lab would be beneficial in terms of achieving this coordination at European level and exploiting the synergies among the different living lab stakeholders, or the mobility also stakeholders in a way. And I think it would in particular enable the possibility of scaling up the efforts that each living lab is carrying out, and at the same time checking whether it's possible to replicate the results from one place to another, exchange also good practices, also work, for example, on the harmonization of methodologies, on the harmonization as well of approaches to follow to tackle similar problems. And in a way also, I think, demonstrate the effectiveness of the living lab as a method. So I think even if living labs exist already for some time, I think their successful implementation still remains a challenge. So I think we still have a lot to learn in this area, and we could benefit from having this type of collaborative networks.
Yeah, thank you. I have so many other questions I would like to ask you now, but before we continue with the debate, we will go to the following speaker. So thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you.
We will follow up with questions. But before we go to the following speaker, I would actually like to share the results of the poll. So we see that the question was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how convinced are you that citizen engagement will be implemented in innovation projects across the world and reshape the way we build our cities? So we see that most of the votes have been 7 and 8, which is actually quite positive, I think. There is one vote with just 1, which means that there's somebody who doesn't actually believe in engaging citizens and working with behavioral change. But overall, we see that people are quite positive. So thank you for giving your insights here. And